Instead, he sat down on the pavement beside Michael, completely unbothered by the dirt and grime. Michael squinted at him, suddenly taking in the details. The sharp jawline, the scruffy beard, the unmistakable deep-set eyes. Something clicked in his brain. No way. His words trailed off. The man smiled slightly. Keanu, he confirmed. Michael blinked. Keanu Reeves? The Keanu Reeves? The Hollywood superstar, the action hero, the legend? And here he was, sitting on a filthy sidewalk next to a homeless man and his kids as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Michael didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Keanu glanced at the cardboard sign in front of him and then back at the children. Have you guys eaten today? Michael hesitated, shame creeping up his spine. Not since this morning. Keanu's expression softened. He stood up and stretched a hand toward Michael. Come on, let's get you something warm to eat. Michael stared at the outstretched hand, his pride warring with his desperation. But then he felt Noah shift in his lap, a soft whimper escaping the little boy's lips, and the choice was made for him. He reached up and took Keanu's hand. The grip was firm, reassuring. Keanu helped him up, and together, they walked into the diner. The warmth of the diner wrapped around them the moment they stepped inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, making Michael's stomach clench painfully. The kids blinked, wide-eyed, as if they had just stepped into another world, one where hunger and cold didn't exist. Keanu led them to a booth in the corner, away from the bustling counter where waitresses weaved between tables. Michael hesitated for a moment, still reeling from the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, a broke, homeless father, sitting in a diner with Keanu freaking Reeves. A waitress approached, smiling warmly at Keanu. Hey there, hon. What can I get you? Keanu didn't even glance at the menu. 4 plates of the biggest, heartiest meal you've got. He turned to Michael. What do you guys like? Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't remember the last time he had the luxury of choosing a meal. Pancakes. Noah piped up, suddenly alert, his little eyes sparkling with hope. Emma hesitated, as if afraid to ask for too much. Maybe some eggs and toast? Jacob, always the responsible one, looked at his father before speaking. Anything's fine, sir. Keanu chuckled. Pancakes, eggs, toast, and throw in some bacon and sausages too. He glanced at Michael. And coffee for us? Michael swallowed hard and nodded. Yeah, coffee would be great. The waitress jotted down the order and walked off. Michael turned to Keanu, his throat tight. I don't know how to thank you for this. Keanu shrugged, leaning back against the booth. You don't have to. Just eat. The food arrived quickly, steaming plates set before them. Michael's hands shook slightly as he picked up his fork. He had always made sure his kids ate first, but now, with a full plate in front of him, the hunger clawed at his insides. He took a bite. It was the best thing he had tasted in months. For the first time in what felt like forever, Michael allowed himself to breathe. He watched as Noah stuffed pancakes into his mouth, syrup dripping down his chin. Emma giggled for the first time in weeks. Jacob, despite his attempt to act mature, was practically inhaling his food. Keanu sipped his coffee, watching them with a quiet smile. After a while, Michael put his fork down and exhaled. Why? He asked softly. Keanu raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why stop for us? Why help? Keanu looked at the kids before answering. Because I know what it's like to lose everything. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of emotion in it. I've had my share of loss, and sometimes the smallest kindness can change someone's world. Michael swallowed. He had read the stories, how Keanu had lost his best friend, his daughter, his partner, how, despite all the pain, he remained kind. Look, Keanu continued, setting his cup down, I don't just want to buy you dinner and walk away. I want to help, really help. Michael tensed. I don't want pity. Keanu shook his head. This isn't pity. This is a second chance. He pulled a small notepad from his jacket pocket and scribbled something down. This is the number of a friend of mine. He owns a garage. I already called him. He's willing to give you a job. Michael's breath hitched. A job? Keanu slid the paper across the table. Full-time, decent pay. Enough to get you and the kids back on your feet. Michael's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. It was real. This wasn't just some celebrity's good deed for social media. This was real help. Tears burned at the back of his eyes. He clenched his jaw, trying to hold them back, but when he looked up at his children, at the hope in their eyes, he couldn't stop them. A choked sob escaped his throat. His voice broke. I don't know what to say. Keanu reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me one thing. Michael wiped at his eyes, nodding. Anything? When you're back on your feet, Keanu said softly, help someone else who needs it. Michael let out a shaky breath. I will. Keanu smiled, his own eyes glistening. Then that's enough. At that moment, Noah climbed into Keanu's lap without hesitation, wrapping his tiny arms around him. Thank you, mister, he whispered against Keanu's chest. Keanu held him close, his own voice thick with emotion. You're welcome, buddy. And for the first time in a long time, Michael felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. Months had passed, but the memory of that night, the night Keanu stopped, the night everything changed, was still fresh in Michael's mind. Life was different now. He had a job, a roof over his children's heads, and, for the first time in what felt like forever, he had hope. He still woke up sometimes in a panic, his body conditioned to the cold of the pavement, to the fear of his children crying out from hunger. But then he would open his eyes and remember, we're safe now. We made it. Michael had thrown himself into his work at the garage. He was determined to prove that he deserved this chance. Every morning, he kissed his kids goodbye before school and headed to work, pouring his soul into fixing engines, restoring the broken to something functional again, much like his own life. One evening, as he was cleaning up the shop, his phone rang. A number he knew well by now. Michael? It's Keanu. A smile crept onto his face. Keanu. Hey, man. I was wondering when I'd hear from you again. Keanu chuckled on the other end. Been a bit busy, but I wanted to check in. How's the job? Michael leaned against the workbench, wiping grease from his hands. I love it. I forgot how much I enjoyed working on cars. It's funny. I spend my days fixing things, but in reality, I was the one who needed fixing. A pause. Then Keanu's voice, warm and full of understanding. You were never broken, Michael. You just needed someone to remind you of your strength. Michael swallowed hard, the weight of those words sinking in. He glanced at the small photograph of his kids that he had taped above his workstation. I can never thank you enough, man. You didn't just help me. You saved my family. Another pause. Then, quietly, you would have done the same for someone else? Michael's grip tightened around the phone. I will, he promised. One day, when the time is right. Keanu's voice was filled with certainty. You'll know when that day comes. The call ended, but Michael stood there for a long time, staring at the phone, as if the weight of a new purpose had just settled onto his shoulders. That night, he walked home beneath a sky littered with stars. He wasn't in a rush. For the first time in a long time, he could just enjoy the feeling of existing, without fear, without uncertainty. Then, something caught his eye. On the opposite sidewalk, near the flickering light of a street lamp, a woman sat curled up against the concrete wall. Beside her, a small boy, no older than Noah, rested his head against her shoulder, his tiny arms wrapped around himself for warmth. Michael stopped walking. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He knew this scene. He had lived this scene. The woman wasn't holding a sign. She wasn't asking for help. But the exhaustion on her face, the way she clutched her son protectively, was a language Michael understood far too well. His heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment Keanu had spoken about. He took a slow breath, stepping off the curb and crossing the street. The woman flinched as he approached, her arms tightening around the sleeping boy. Hey, he said gently. She looked up, her eyes filled with guarded suspicion. What do you want? Michael crouched down to her level, just like Keanu had done for him that night. I just want to know if you're okay. The woman hesitated. Then, with a voice so quiet it almost got lost in the city noise, she whispered, We're just trying to get through the night. A lump formed in Michael's throat. God, I know that feeling. He reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against his wallet. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a celebrity with endless resources. But he had enough. Enough to make a difference. Enough to be the person he had once prayed for. There's a diner down the street, he said. Let me buy you two a meal. Just a warm meal, no strings attached. The woman's eyes filled with uncertainty. Why would you do that? Michael exhaled, glancing toward the night sky. Because someone once did the same for me. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she nodded. As they walked toward the diner, Michael glanced down at the sleeping boy, and something inside him tightened. This could have been Noah. This could have been us. He didn't ask her story right away. He didn't push. He knew that sometimes the hardest thing to do wasn't surviving. It was accepting help. When they stepped inside the warmth of the diner, the woman looked around in disbelief, as if she had stepped into another world. Michael gave her a reassuring smile. Order whatever you want. Her hands trembled as she picked up the menu. The waitress approached, her pen poised above her notepad. What can I get you folks tonight? The woman hesitated. Then, with tears brimming in her eyes, she whispered, Pancakes. Michael felt his breath hitch. Pancakes. The same thing Noah had asked for that night. Fate had a funny way of bringing things full circle. As the woman wiped at her tears, as her son stirred awake to the scent of warm food, as hope flickered back into their eyes, Michael felt something deep within him settle. Keanu had been right. He did know when the time was right. And now, he was the one changing a life. One simple act of kindness. And the cycle of hope continued. The end.